Does it really matter where I get my coffee? Let's talk about it. Hey, I'm Father Mark Mary with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and this is Ascension Presents. All right, my favorite place to go and get coffee, get a little flat white mochaccino venti. All right, if they also give money to support Planned Parenthood, which does abortions, right? Can I support this business? Can I buy coffee there? This is called problem of cooperation with evil. And right, it's just this reality that you and I experience and come up against on a daily basis, almost constantly, where the business, the service I like to use also either does something evil or they financially support something evil. And so it's how do we navigate, like what can we do when my pharmacy also sells the Plan B, or where my ride sharing app also gives money to support abortion, or my streaming platform also does a heck of a lot to promote a worldview and an ideology which is contrary to Christianity and morality and God's law. Like, how do we navigate this? So that's what we're going to do in this video. And I'm going to answer specifically the coffee question, but I just want to establish a couple things first. Like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to establish some principles and give you some tools to make these judgments, to help navigate these different complicated matters on a regular basis. And for you to stay focused on the general and not get distracted with the very, very specific. I'm not going to actually name companies. You're going to know what I'm talking about. But just that little bit of keeping things a little bit more general, I think is going to help answer a lot more questions than just one specific question. So cooperation with evil. First principle is cooperation with evil, supporting evil, either in intention or materially. It's always a bad thing, right? Even though it's a tiny, tiny thing, it's always a bad thing, in part because we might be even a tiny way supporting the evil and helping it continue. But also it's bad for us to always be swimming in these waters. One of the fruits of this is going to be indifference. And that's something we really want to avoid, and something we're going to talk about again at the end. Okay, now when we're talking about cooperating with evil, we're basically talking about two ways in which we can cooperate with evil. The one that's very sort of clear is it's called formal cooperation. And formal cooperation is when we share in the intention or the end of the evil act, right? For a reminder on object, intention, circumstance, please watch last week's video. We're not going to kind of re-go through it again. For example, I have two different options for where I can get my coffee. One of them I know gives money to support abortion. One of them I'm pretty confident doesn't. If in that situation, I buy my coffee at the place that supports abortion because I know they support abortion, even though I'm giving a tiny, 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 tiny bit to support it materially, I'm sharing in their act. And sharing in the act or formal cooperation with evil is always itself sinful. It's always itself evil. So even if it's in a big way or if it's in a little way, if I am sharing in the evil of another and cooperating with the evil of another because I believe in what they're doing that's bad, like that is called formal cooperation, and that's evil. What most of us are going to be coming across, though, is what's called material cooperation. Material cooperation is when my frequenting some business, my giving money to them, etc., is going to be somehow helping this evil transpire. And this is broken into two categories, which are somewhat broad but helpful. There's proximate material cooperation and remote material cooperation. Like proximate is I'm very close to the evil, or I'm helping it in a very significant way. So using the streaming service or online video platform, which also has immoral content, it's very different than the accountant at the electric company, which helps this energy company function, which also gives money to Planned Parenthood, is cooperating with that evil in a very, very remote way, as opposed to maybe the secretary at the abortion clinic, the abortion facility, right? They might be there and they might be thinking to themselves, I'm here because I really need a job. I don't support what's going on here, but I need a job, and so I'm going to work here, right? Like this would be proximate material cooperation. Now, again, one of the things that to lay out is that when we're dealing with morality, we're actually making judgments. And so sometimes you're going to get people making different judgments, right? So when we're judging, like generally speaking, in most cases, maybe not all cases, but in most cases, proximate material cooperation with evil is itself going to be sinful. Again, there could be some situations where it's unavoidable or permissible, but almost always, proximate material cooperation with evil is going to be itself evil. Now let's talk about remote cooperation. Remote cooperation is, again, this idea of sometimes I use a ride-sharing app, or sometimes I use an airline, or sometimes I use a streaming service, which also does immoral, evil things. Maybe I buy my cup of coffee at a place which also supports abortion. Like, how do I understand this? What is it? All right, it's remote insofar as like what I'm doing is very, 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 very little to help support it. So sometimes material cooperation with evil, it's unavoidable. Or we have to ask these questions, make these judgments, like how much of a burden, how much do I have to do to research what these companies that I'm interacting with on a daily basis, how much do I have to research what they're doing with their money? Or like how far do I have to go out of my way? Like how much should I be willing to be inconvenienced to not support one of these businesses? Like how do we navigate that, right? And so the principle is that again, we always want to try and avoid cooperating with evil. If we're going to, in a way which is even remote, there has to be a reason for it. And we have to make this judgment. Is avoiding it too much of a burden or too much of a cost to myself? Is it reasonable to make this little sacrifice, avoid this service, inconvenience myself a little bit so that I'm not materially cooperating in this evil? Let's apply this in two ways to help it make sense, okay? Wherever you're watching this video, and somehow this video is remote material cooperation with evil. Because as far as I know, every platform that these videos are shared on also uses their platform and their influence and their money to support evil in different ways, or support and promote a worldview which is, again, contrary to God's law. But the judgment is this, it's like, is there good enough reason, significant enough reason to still put our videos on these platforms? We're making the judgment that yes, it is. So the coffee question, can I get my coffee at my favorite coffee place when I know that they also give some money to Planned Parenthood, all right? So first of all, it's this, we have to rule out form of cooperation. Like if you are getting your coffee there, again, because you like the fact that they give money to places that do abortions, like that is going to be sinful. You cannot do it. You cannot formally cooperate in evil. If you do not agree with the intention, what about the remote material cooperation, right? And you're going to actually have kind of two judgments on it. The most popular, that which I've come across the most and heard the most, is getting your coffee, you're contributing a fraction of 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 a cent to their donation to Planned Parenthood. It's not good, but it's not sinful. Like it would be, they're saying it's a little bit too much to ask people to avoid supporting, to getting their coffee there, just because of, again, how the world works. So a lot of people are going to say it's not sinful. You don't have to go to confession. It's morally illicit. I do struggle with that, to be honest. And I think it's a matter of judging, like what is appropriate, like what's too much to ask of God's people, right? Again, the principle is for us even to remotely cooperate with evil, there has to be some reason to do it, like a good reason to do it. And it considered like a little bit too much to ask people to avoid it. But right, like when you go into the airport, there's maybe a handful of airlines that can provide your flight, but there's probably 10 or 12 different places you can get your coffee at a major airport. So that's where I kind of struggle. It's like, is it really asking too much of God's people to avoid this place that we know gives money that supports like abortion? I think it's avoidable, and I don't think it's too much to ask of people. But even more this, and this is going to the question of indifference, like abortion's a huge problem. Millions of innocent children are still being killed every year. And my question for you is this, is like, what is different in your life because this reality and this evil exists in the world? For most people, it's like maybe how they vote every couple of years, or maybe, they go to the March for Life once a year. Maybe even if you're like a really pro-life, right? A couple of weekends a month, you're praying outside of abortion clinic. I think that for those of us who are pro-life and understand the dignity of the human person and desire to really protect it, like something in our life needs to be different. I'm deeply convicted that abortion is such a great evil. We can't be indifferent, and we can't be indifferent towards our own indifference, right? Like the Lord said, turn the other cheek, not look the other way. And too often we become accustomed to just looking the other way and being okay with materially cooperating with evil. And part of the problem is like we become a little bit cold, indifferent, numb, not effectively invested or affected by the reality of abortion. And I do think it's important for us to have regular, concrete, like behavioral changes in our lives, which in one part are an offering that we make it as an offering for the end of abortion, but also which keep our conscience a little bit sharp, which keep this evil and its reality and existence at the forefront of our minds on a regular basis. And so even more than avoiding getting coffee at a place that supports abortion because of like the material cooperation, I think it's even more a question of indifference. And so my brothers and sisters, do you have to confess if you get coffee at a place that supports abortion? Probably not. Most people will say that's not necessary. But should you avoid it? I'll say yeah. I'll say yes. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it makes sense. I don't think it's too much to ask of you to find other places to get your coffee. And I think it's a great way for us to make an offering and to be reminded of the reality of abortion, so that when opportunities arise, that we'll do whatever we can to make sure it's no longer a reality. Next week, we're going to talk about like the hurdle we're going to have to overcome if you've been convicted of this video to actually make the change. So come on back next week and we'll get into it. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, we are pilgrims on this earth. Somos peregrinos poco a poco, little by little. Vamos a llegar. We're going to make it. God bless y'all.